You are with Cape Talk.
Views and News with Clarence Ford.
Welcome back. It is 9:36. Views and news through till 12 o'clock. And that very huge appointment unfolds over the next couple of minutes. It's an appointment with the naked scientist. Dr. Chris Smith, lecturer at the University of Cambridge, joins us. The naked scientist, and he joins us on air to answer a variety of science, medical related questions, whatever question you want to throw at him. You absolutely welcome. Welcome, Dr. Chris Smith. Good to have you back.
Morning, Clarence. Do you know what my favourite story of the week this week is? And I haven't forgot my homework either, by the way, on ear noises, which perhaps we can come to in a minute. But my favourite story this week, when I was growing up, I worked on the London Commodity Exchange. That is the stock market equivalent for commodities. In other words, things you trade like coffee and cocoa. So I cut my teeth doing trading of those futures. So I became quite familiar with the cocoa industry because the company I worked for also had a physicals arm to the company. So they actually traded in the physical commodity as well as futures, crops that hadn't been grown yet. So I often came into contact with cocoa beans. And they're really quite sort of striking because if you look at them, taste them, grind them up, eat them, they don't taste anything like as nice as that bar of foil wrapped chocolate. So how do you turn one into the other? Well, there's an amazing paper out this week in one of the big science journals by a guy at the University of Nottingham, Paul Gopalchang. And what he has done is to work out how you get the amazing flavour of chocolate from those, what are effectively the seeds of a cocoa bean, cocoa pod. And everyone thought it was all down to the environment the trees grow in, because they grow in West Africa, they also grow in South America. Or is it down to the soil they're growing on, the ripening conditions? Actually, it turns out it's all down to microorganisms. Just like cheese, we add the right combination of bugs to a cheese culture to get an amazing flavour cheese. He did some experiments where they got 3 different farms producing chocolate in Colombia. And they found that as the beans are fermented in the mucilage, which is the white mushy soft stuff that's inside the cocoa pods when you harvest them, there's about 4 to 7 day fermentation period. You just leave the beans spread out and this mold and other things grows all over them. They use genetics to analyse that, and they have found the suite of microbes that goes along with the flavours. And they've found they can make very high-end tasting chocolate from very average beans effectively, just with the right culture of microbes. So this says we could be looking forward to much cheaper but very, very fancy chocolate in the future. But I mean, the potential is huge here because it just goes to show the contribution that microbes make to the flavour of chocolate. So by tweaking that formula, who knows what sorts of exciting chocolates and textures we might be able to get in the future for the industry. Isn't that exciting? Amazing what science can do, isn't it? Certainly food for thought.
Yeah, but you're still going to need the beans.
Of course you need the beans. They're the raw material.
Yeah.
So but it's a bit like saying no one's losing their job. They're just going to have an opportunity to eat even better chocolate. It's a bit like coffee, I suppose, in the sense that we need the coffee beans, but the way you roast them, the treatment that comes downstream of growing the raw material, that is the key thing.
Yeah.
Now, on the homework, before we forget that, we were asked last week by somebody who said, why is it that all of a sudden, out of the blue, I will hear a noise in my ear, just one ear, and then I get this sort of high-pitched ringing and a temporary deafness. And I speculated this is a sort of temporary tinnitus caused possibly by a loud noise inside your head, a bubble popping, a muscle moving, or an irritation to a nerve. This is a medical defined thing. It's very common. It's called transient ear noise or transient acoustic noise. And it does exactly what this person described. People out of the blue will get an abrupt sense of a pop or a click in their ear, a high-pitched ringing, and then a temporary, maybe 10 to 30 seconds of attenuated hearing on that side, and then everything goes back to normal. No one knows exactly what it is caused by, but we speculated that this might be, for instance, a bubble popping or a blob of earwax in your eustachian system, and the sudden equalization causing a click, which is to your ear very loud, but no one hears it from outside, and that causes this temporary deafness state. Most people agree that probably is the reason. So our speculation last week was about as accurate probably as we can get because we don't know 100% what causes it, but that's a reasonable speculation.
Okay, let's go to Poloso. Poloso, we've prioritized your call. Welcome. Go ahead for the Naked Scientist.
Hi, Clarence and Dr. Chris. Great show as always. I just want to find out between men and women in football, who is more likely to suffer a broken leg?
I guess, are you getting at the fact that people often say that the women's game is far more or less aggressive in terms of there are fewer people rolling around on the floor, clutching their legs and ankles and saying they've got severe injuries and then suddenly getting up and running around again. People say that the women's game is more focused on the football rather than the theatrics. I'm inclined to agree to an extent. If we talk in science terms and purely energy terms, because what causes an injury? You need energy to cause an injury. So the more energy something has, the more likely it is to break. The bigger they are, the harder they fall kind of point. So if you've got men and they are bigger and taller and they are potentially moving faster and have more energy, if they come to an abrupt stop, they are putting more energy through their tissues and therefore there is the potential to do a bigger injury. That may be mitigated by the fact that men may have greater stature, bigger bones, bigger muscles, which might be better shock absorbers for said energy. So I don't think it's as simple as just energy terms, but I would say possibly that the men are probably going a bit faster and probably have a bit more kinetic energy, therefore they might do more damage to themselves than in the women's game. But I think we don't know because we haven't done the actual tests on this yet. We will probably see that time will tell.
Okay, let's go to Mag Mini, and I think I've got a vested interest in your response. Dr. Chris Smith, Mag Mini writes, I've noticed changes. I no longer feel fatigued like I used to. The pains that I used to have in my body are gone. I sleep better at night. My post-nasal drip has disappeared. My acid reflux has reduced. What is happening to my body with a sugar-free diet and a year later?
Probably some weight loss, because all of those things pretty much would go along with carrying a few too many pounds. When we have high refined sugar intake, sugar is a very pure form of energy in the body and it gets used in preference to any other energy source in our tissues. And any excess energy is immediately shunted down the turn into fat pathway. And if you therefore eat a diet with lots of sugar in it and other calories, you'll just shove all of those calories straight into fat. You will also produce a big high insulin surge as soon as you take in the sugar, because insulin is the hormone that controls blood sugar. This turns more sugar into fat and also makes you feel hungry and lethargic because it plummets, the blood sugar plummets in the aftermath if you've just eaten refined sugar. If you have eliminated this from your diet, the chances are you have probably cut calories from your diet, because refined sugar goes straight into your bloodstream and produces all the effects I've just summarized. Whereas more complicated diet nutrients, like more complex carbohydrates, the kinds of things that are in proteins and more protein-rich diet, which take longer to break down and liberate the calories from, they will produce a more steady blood sugar level with fewer departures of insulin. This usually translates into weight loss. Weight gain is a risk factor for pre-diabetic and diabetic situations, also for fat accumulation around the body. That itself is a risk factor for obstructive sleep apnea and snoring and a saggy airway, which can also cause poor sleep quality. And if you have poor sleep quality, you feel hungrier during the day and more tired during the day. So if you lose a bit of weight, you generally find all these things get better. It can also increase testosterone levels a bit, which might contribute. So I'd say all of the above is probably contributing, and good on you. If you feel good on it, carry on doing it.
Absolutely. And I may just follow suit. Since you were on the topic of chocolate, somebody wants to know, where is it? Now I've got to find it. Question for Dr. Smith. Is it true that there can be many insect fragments in a slab of chocolate? Sean with that question. And why would that be?
Hello, Sean. Absolutely. Because chocolate is a natural product, it grows on trees, literally, and we harvest it and then we spread the beans out, having chopped them out of their cacao pods, and we let them ferment for a week or so. Insects get everywhere. There is an industry standard insect parts per million, which you mustn't breach. And there are various ways of testing chocolate. There's a whole industry around doing this, and you usually do it with number of different techniques, including genetically. You can look for the DNA of insects, and that's one way that you can confirm it. But samples are taken, so batches are tested for the amount of insect parts that are in there, and you mustn't breach more than a certain threshold industry standard to meet safety and hygiene requirements. And I think higher caliber chocolates have lower insect parts than others, but who knows what contribution those insects make to the flavour. They probably do something, but there are certainly insect parts in chocolate. But then, so what? I mean, we can eat insects. Insects are quite tasty. They're very high in protein.
I'm going to have a second thought about that next slab, though. Okay, let's go to the WhatsApp line. Let's take a listen to a couple of voice notes.
Good morning. I have a very strange question for the naked scientist. About 2 years ago, I had what they call a vessel stroke, or about 10 of them. And the only problem I have is my left foot is numb on the underneath on the left side, the ball of the foot and the toes. But the weirdest thing is, if I sleep with socks on or I wear softs, the left foot, when I take my shoes off, I wake up in the morning, the left sock, the heel is on top of my foot, not the other foot, just the partially lame foot. I mean, I know it is odd, but I'd really like to know if you could even work out why. Thank you. Oh, sorry, name's Bev Gregory.
Oh, Bev, what a weird one. It's a bit like saying, why do socks always end up inside the duvet in the washing machine? I don't know the answer to this. I mean, I think what you're asking is, why does the sock turn itself round spontaneously on the left foot, so the heel ends up on the top, round the back effectively, round the front from the back, and not on the right? The only thing I can think is that if you have got some kind of neurological problem with that foot in the aftermath of the problem you described, the vascular problem, maybe the posture is different in that foot, and maybe the spontaneous movements made by that foot are slightly different, and the combination of the two means that the sock ends up wrapping itself round the front when the other foot moves and has the more normal posture that keeps the sock where it should be. That would be my best guess.
Okay, let's go to Dawn, pondering the limitations of testosterone levels in female athletes. It continues. I agree that levels that put a woman well in the range, in the male range, may present an unfair advantage. However, surely we need to assess genetically the level of response to testosterone. She's looking for your thoughts, Dr. Chris Smith.
Hi, Dawn. I guess what Dawn's getting at is that we're into an era now where some people go through a sex change, and so we may have people who were formerly men who are in a female, or they're now describing themselves as females, and in certain circumstances, they may have low levels of testosterone in the aftermath, but even so, they have built a stature, a body stature, that gave them a male physique. In other cases, we have individuals who are identifying as female, but in fact are still effectively biochemically male because they have male testosterone levels. And we know that testosterone is an anabolic hormone. It's growth promoting. It promotes strong muscles, which is why people sometimes supplement with it to build muscles if they're gym goers. Not that that's a good idea. There are all kinds of side effects of doing that, including shrinking your testicles, giving yourself high blood pressure, bad skin, and it can also have other consequences as well. But if you have high levels of testosterone, you will have an advantage over people who have lower levels of testosterone. Men and women both have testosterone, but women's levels of testosterone are much lower than men's are. What Dawn, I think, is getting at is, are women, because they usually operate at much lower levels of testosterone naturally, are their tissues more sensitive to testosterone? I don't know what the relative sensitivity of the testosterone and androgen receptors in women versus men are. If there are any endocrinologists or hormone specialists who know the answer to this, do please inform me and let me know. I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable point to make. If you have low levels of testosterone, perhaps you become more sensitive to its effects. Women do rely on androgens for a range of different reasons, including libido and other things. But I don't think there's a hugely great increase in sensitivity to it, because otherwise they would effectively masculinize. And if women do start taking testosterone supplements, they do develop masculine characteristics. So I think probably the sensitivity to it is roughly the same. The overall stimulus, the level that's there, is just much lower in women. But if anyone knows different, especially if you're a hormone specialist, do please let me know.
And then there's a question in from Megan in Stellenbosch. She writes, Morning, Dr. Chris. Yesterday, my Pilates teacher said she's drinking bio water. It contains salt and potassium and some minerals. I said, I think it's just a gimmick. You can get all these things from your food, from your diet. But she swears by it. Who's right?
The person who's laughing all the way to the bank is the person who's selling you this stuff. It's water. And it comes out of a tap at virtually no price. And as long as it's got no other things in it you don't want in there, like microbes and that kind of stuff that could give you infections, you can just get your water from a tap. And as Dawn says, or whatever, it's what, not Dawn, it's what Megan says, is what food is for. You get all of your micronutrients from what you put in your mouth, and food's got plenty of them in there as long as you eat a healthy, balanced diet. Drinking extra water with dodgy salts and that kind of thing is just marketing speak. Just eat a healthy diet and stay adequately but not overhydrated. You'll be absolutely fine.
Okay, we've had this question before, but I think we should take it again. Let's take it, Joe, via WhatsApp. It's a voice note.
What causes tinnitus?
Did you get that?
I got what causes
Chris?
tinnitus.
Yeah,
And the
that's
answer
it.
to this is that we don't know for sure, but tinnitus is almost certainly related to damage to the cochlea, which is the inner ear structure that converts the sound waves coming in from the environment into electrical activity, brain waves ostensibly, that your brain decodes into the sound experience that we hear. And when the organ of hearing, the cochlea, is damaged, usually by prolonged exposure to excessively loud noises over a period of time, then the brain is said to begin to invent experiences corresponding to signals which are not arriving from the cochlea. In other words, the cochlea along its length decodes sound according to different frequencies. So at different points along the cochlea, you hear different frequencies. So if you're exposed to very loud noises of a certain frequency, that bit of the cochlea gets damaged. That's sending signals into the brain, which is listening for a representation of the full soundscape. If there are holes in the signals that are arriving from the cochlea because that bit's damaged, the brain says, in inverted commas, I can't hear anything coming from those frequencies, so I must not be listening hard enough. So the cochlea turns up the volume. It's a bit like turning up the radio on an old FM set. You get more hiss because you end up amplifying the noise as well as the signals you do want. So we believe that tinnitus is almost like the auditory equivalent of phantom limb syndrome, when you have a part of your body amputated, but you can still feel it, sometimes painfully. When you can't hear from certain bits of the cochlea, the brain amplifies the missing signals in an attempt to tune into them, and in the process makes more noise. And it's those noises that we hear as those intrusive, grating, grinding, buzzing, hissing, whistling sounds that can be extremely distracting. And because of the way our hearing system works, we are very good at tuning into things we want to hear. Because if you think about it, you stand in a noisy environment and you're trying to listen to one person speaking, and all those sounds are coming in equivalently into your ears. But we're very good at focusing our eyes on the target that we want to listen to and amplifying just the sounds we want to hear. Tinnitus is so intrusive, it makes you focus on it. So all of those amplification and focusing mechanisms also kick in and make it worse. So the key thing to do with tinnitus is to ignore it. Hard as that is to say, ignore it. And if that doesn't work, sometimes presenting other sounds, which are what we call pink or white noise, just hissing or whooshing noises, other noises, they can mask the tinnitus sound, and that makes it easier to ignore. So then you tune it out and then you get respite. Very common though, about one person in 5 gets tinnitus.
I'm hoping you can answer this one really kind of quickly, but Brioni wants to know, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Brioni. I wanted to know if you have come across hawthorn in the treatment of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Are there any natural ways to deal with this heart problem?
Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, also called HOCM historically is a genetic problem where the heart muscle gets too big. And a big heart full of love is a good thing under certain circumstances, but the problem is when the muscle grows too much, it starts to place enormous blood supply demands on your coronary arteries. So the muscle's so big, it needs so much oxygen that sometimes your normal coronary arteries can't supply enough. So that can cause a problem. Secondly, the enlargement often happens around the places where the blood is trying to leave the heart through, for instance, the aortic route. And it can obstruct the flow of blood out of the heart, meaning that the heart workload gets even higher, so it needs even more blood to supply the heart, which again can outstrip the supply coming down the coronary arteries. So what we do is, because we know this is a genetic and familial trait, we can monitor people who have this, and there are various drugs that can be given to try to slow down the rate at which the heart enlarges. That can control things, but I'm not aware of anything other than those medical interventions, which can ultimately end up requiring a transplant, actually. Also, electrical ways of stabilizing the heart in case it goes into abnormal rhythms may also be required, but often a transplant in very, very severe cases is needed for these sorts of cases. But drugs can control the enlargement of the heart very successfully, but I haven't heard of any natural remedies that are equivalently good.
We've got to wrap it there. And again, in appreciation, Dr. Chris Smith avails his time every Friday just after 9:30. The Naked Scientist, ours, and he's here to answer your question. Next chance, next Friday, just after 9:30.
You are with Cape Talk.
Views and news with Clarence Ford.